Part you're all waiting for, right? You've all been waiting and dying for me to get up and present for you. I just found out yesterday that I was doing this, so bear with me a little bit. I'm excited to be here. I come from Fremont County, and just excited to participate in this cereal school. I've got 3 big ideas that I want to talk about today. We're going to talk about some basic weed management principles that for cereal grains. We'll talk about herbicide resistance and tolerance, and we're going to look at some of the plants, some of the weeds in Idaho that have been identified as being resistant to herbicides, and we'll talk a little bit about those. And then I'm going to show you the tool that you can use to help make decisions about what herbicides to use and the rates in which you should be using those. So we'll go ahead and get started. The very first thing that we should be doing is making sure that we buy certified weed-free seed. Good clean seed is going to always be one of the best things that we can do to limit weed production or weed production on our farms. Okay. The second thing is we can try to reduce weed population. The first way that we can do that is by using a shallow cultivation. Keep those weed seeds in that top ½ inch of the soil. And what that does is it's going to cause those seeds to germinate. We'd rather have those germinate when we know they're going to be there than surprise attack us later on in the season. We're going to be a lot more effective at controlling weeds when they just start germinating than we are later on in their lives. Okay, so those are really important things that we can do. If we have any small patches of weeds in a field, we want to try to eradicate those weeds using as many different approaches as we can, whatever is appropriate for that weed and for the scale that we're looking at. That can be a really important thing that we do. Rotating our crops. If we've got a cereal grain rotation going on and we're having trouble with winter annual weeds, then we can switch to a spring barley crop or something like that'll help us to open up some windows for weed control there. If it's possible, try to rotate between different types of crops. A more diverse rotation is always good. So going from a cereal grain to a sugar beet or potato or those types of rotations are going to really help us out. Okay. Around the edges of our fields, if we can kind of create and maintain a buffer zone around our fields, that's going to really help our weed control efforts as well. Most of our seeds are going to be moving, if they're on the edge of the field, they're going to migrate into the center of the field. So trying to maintain that buffer zone around the field, and if we can, having that perennial grass cover around the edges of our field will help to, it's a natural cultural way to eliminate a lot of our weeds that way as well. When I think of weed control, this is one of the ones that I think of very first. And with herbicides, the first thing that, and we're going to get into this a lot more later in this presentation, use the PNW handbook as a guide to select herbicide treatments. The PNW is the Pacific Northwest weed handbook. It talks about weeds, insects, diseases. So it's a really great, useful tool, and we're going to show you how to use that here at the end of this presentation. With herbicides, if we can try to get those weeds as soon as they germinate, we're going to be way more successful. And it doesn't matter what the life cycle of that plant is, whether it's an annual or a perennial, a biennial, we're going to be most effective right there at the beginning when they germinate. Okay. If our grain crop is stressed, it's going to create an opening for those herbicides to have some negative impacts on our crop as well. So if we've got stressed grain crops, we'd probably want to avoid using herbicides at that time. And then finally, with herbicides, always read and follow the pesticide label. We want to make sure that we're using our herbicides, our pesticides, according to that label, according to what has been proven to be effective. Okay. But when we get into herbicide use, we know that there are some weeds out there that have proven to be tolerant to our weed control measures, right? And then as those tolerant weeds continue to be there, we end up with resistant strains of those weeds. And so let's talk about some definitions really quickly as we talk about this. First of all, if a weed is susceptible to being killed by an herbicide, we call that herbicide susceptibility. Okay. Growing up, I had really terrible allergies. Hay fever was terrible, and so I would try to find the right medication that was going to help me to get through the day, right? And I grew up in Wyoming on a dairy farm. I sprayed a lot of weeds and spent a lot of time out in the grass, the pollinated grass. Oh, it was terrible. But when I found something that worked, I wanted to keep using it, right? And I wanted to keep using it, and so. This is no different with our herbicides. We find something that works, we want to keep using it. That's our first nature to continue to use that herbicide. But just like with my hay fever back when I was younger, if I continued to use that, sometimes it wasn't as effective over a long period of time. And once in a while, we find these weeds that tolerate the herbicides a little bit more, right? They're not going to be, the herbicide's just not as effective at killing those, right? And so those are herbicide tolerant plants, okay? What we try to stay away from, and you know, I taught high school agriculture for 19 years and spent most of my time out in shops and wood shops and in metal shops, and my allergies, I think I was allergic to my job, right? And so I would get a cold, and because of all that dust, it just lingered and lingered and lingered, right? So I would go to the doctor and I'd say, I've got this terrible cold, I need something. And they would say, well, we can give you, we can give you this antibiotic, right? And I'd take that antibiotic, boy, it worked great. And within a few days I was cleared up, and then a few weeks later, because I'm in that petri dish of a high school, I'd get sick again, and that wood shop dust would come back, and It'd get me, and I'd end up having to go back to the doctor. The doctors don't like to continue to prescribe antibiotics, right? Why is that? What's that? A little louder. Yeah, they stop being as effective, right? Okay, and in fact, not only do they stop being as effective, those bacteria that are causing us to be sick, if that antibiotic stops working on that, then I create a big problem, right? When I'm really sick and I need an antibiotic, I have a lot less tools to use to fight those diseases, right? And the same thing happens with herbicides. We have plants that become resistant to those herbicides. They've developed some mechanism that they pass on to their offspring that doesn't allow them to, or that makes them more fit to survive when they're being attacked by these herbicides. And so we're going to talk about these herbicide-resistant plants, and especially those that are found in cereal grains. Okay, who can tell me what this plant is right here? Wild oats. That's probably not a hard one to guess. It is found everywhere. Okay, this is wild oats. So why is it a problem? What do you guys think? I'm going to wait for an answer.
It's grassy weed, and you're trying to kill the grassy weed and the grass plant.
Yeah. Yeah. We're trying to control a grass in the middle of a field that's full of grass, right? And it is a problem. It infests over 3 million acres in Idaho. 3 million acres. And in the earlier presentation by the Barley Commission, they said that we had 540,000 acres of barley here in Idaho. Okay, that is about 6 times the amount of acres of barley. Okay. Small grain producers here in Idaho, just in Idaho, spend $9 million per year on controlling this plant. It's a bad deal. For every 10 plants per square foot, you'll reduce your barley yield by 18%. With wheat, it's 24%. Okay, this is a bad mamma jamma. We don't like it. I remember spending time the year after I graduated high school. I worked for a neighboring farmer, and he was growing barley, and my job it seemed like the whole summer was to go out and pick out the wild oats in the field by hand. That was my job. It is a problem. You take that to the elevator, they're going to discount your seed when you have dirty seed, right? Okay. But probably one of the biggest things is it's developed a resistance to several herbicides. And so let's talk about what an herbicide group is, or these. We have several different groups of herbicides. These herbicide groups are classified based on their mode of action. Okay, and a mode of action is basically that biological process that they interrupt, inhibit, or disrupt. So it's basically taking that thing that's happening naturally in that plant, and it's stopping it from working naturally. Okay, and so all our herbicides are grouped based on how they attack the natural biological processes that are happening inside that plant. Okay, so here in Idaho we have these are Group 1 herbicide-resistant plants. So in Group 1, they are acetyl-CoA carboxylase inhibitors. which I don't know that that's super important to understand. What is important to understand is all these chemicals in group 1 act the same. They're going to attack or do the same thing, okay? And these two weeds, we've got wild oats up here on top and Italian ryegrass, are both found to be herbicide resistant in Idaho, okay? Now there's other plants that are group 1 herbicide resistant in other states, but they're not here yet. I only included the ones that are here, okay? This next one is group 2. We've got prickly lettuce, kochia, mayweed chamomile, and Russian thistle. These are group 2 herbicide resistant plants. And, once again, these are any of the herbicides in this group, in group 2, are going to be attacking that plant in the same method or in the same mode of action. Okay, here's a group 4 resistant herbicide resistant plant. What is it? Kochia. Kochia is a bad one. One kochia plant will produce 10,000 seeds per year. Okay? Yeah. So group 4 there. Okay, here's a group 5 herbicide resistant weed. Any ideas? Pigweed, red root pigweed. Okay, it's a photosystem 2 inhibitor and herbicide resistant there. Okay, we've seen this before. And just so you know, if we've seen this before, that's a bad thing. When we have two or the same plant that's resistant in two groups, then we have less tools to use to attack that plant or to kill that weed. Okay. Once again, wild oats. This is group 8 resistance. Okay. Kochia again, right? That's group 9. We've seen this one before as well. It was a group 1 herbicide resistant plant as well. This is Italian ryegrass. Okay. It's a group 15 herbicide resistant. Oh, there is again. Wild oats, group 26 herbicide resistant. Now, not all the groups do we understand everything about right now. We know that these herbicides in group 26 kill plants. We just don't really understand how. Okay, but wild oats we can't kill with this either. Okay, so anybody seen this one? This is a new one that has been found here in Idaho. Yeah, it is Palmer amaranth. Okay, this one if we have one plant every foot of corn row, it's going to reduce yield by 40 to 80%. Okay. We have any sugar beet growers in here? Yeah? Oh, sorry. For every 6.5 or 6.6 feet of sugar beet row, we're going to reduce yield 89%. Okay? This Palmer amaranth is becoming, or has been identified as being herbicide resistant as well. Okay? So what do we do about it? We've got these plants that are herbicide resistant. How do we deal with them? Well, the first thing that we can do is don't just rely on herbicides, right? And we talked earlier about, the different methods of weed control, okay? But so we want to use those as much as we can before we use herbicides. First of all, it's going to be a little bit more cost effective for you, but we're also going to be able to help reduce the potential environmental impacts of those herbicides. Okay, rotate your crops regularly. We talked about that, but being able to change the makeup of that monoculture that we put in that field allows us to then start using different herbicides. We're able to start attacking those weeds with different ways. Rotate among herbicide families. We saw wild oats being resistant to three different herbicide families, and so there are other ways that we can kill wild oats. We want to try to use something different. Just because that allergy medicine worked for me one summer for a couple weeks doesn't mean it's going to work all summer. I might be allergic to multiple things, right? And so if I can rotate those medicines that I'm using, then I might be able to be a little bit better off, okay? So let's say I'm spraying and I'm using my normal rates, but I start seeing that my herbicide is not doing what it usually does. Does that mean okay, well, if a little's good, more's better, right? Not necessarily, okay? In fact, probably no is the correct answer. It's probably developing, it's tolerant to those herbicides anyways. And we don't want to develop resistant varieties of that weed, okay? And then another thing that we can do is use herbicide combination. So I might use a couple of different groups of herbicide and tank mix those together. And there's some ways that we can do that, and we're going to use this P&W handbook to show you how to do that. Now, if you want, you can go to this on your own. You can do a screenshot or pull up your camera and go to this. I'm just going to go ahead and click on this right now. Give you a second to pull that up. Now, I haven't been with Extension very long, and I got through the whole summer and most of the fall, and then one of the other Extension educators said, "Hey, have you tried the PNW website?" And I said, "What?" And so I'd been talking to people all summer and hadn't known about this. So let's go through it, and I want to just show you what this looks like here. If is there, oh, I probably need to drag that over, don't I? There we go. There we go. Okay, here's the P&W handbook, and excuse me. So up here at the top, we've got our different headings. These are the main things that we're going to be using. So if I've got a specific insect that I want to control, I can go here to the insects and start doing some research. I've got the plant diseases, weeds, pesticide safety. There's a ton of information on these, and they keep it up to date really well. If you have a specific plant or insect that you can just start typing it in here, and if you're using the same name that they did, then it'll come up if they've got something there. Doesn't always work, but it works for the most part, okay? But I want to go over here to the weeds, okay? So when you click on weeds here, it's going to have this drop-down menu with a lot of different things here, okay? We can find problem weeds. There's a Weeders of the West blog. If we haven't talked about biologic controls, but those are great opportunities to mix into your integrated pest management. But the thing that I was going to look at is the agronomic weed control, because there's so much here for you. We can click on these cereal grains, and it's going to tell us how to control weeds in with each crop. So I'm just going to pick this first one here, barley. Okay, and it's going to pick up those, going to tell me about the specific weeds that are most prevalent in barley. And if I have that wild oat problem in my field, I can click there, and it gives me several different chemicals that I can use. Okay, if I know I'm trying to rotate chemical families, it tells me those chemical families right there. So here's our site of action. It's a group 1. We know that some varieties of wild oats, or some individuals of wild oats, are herbicide resistant to group 1. So I might have to go look for a different one if I want to try something different. Here's a group 8. But these are going to tell me what to use. Okay? And it tells me when, gives me all the information I need so that I can make good management decisions for those weeds. Okay? I just thought that was a really valuable tool. I don't. How many of you have used PNC handbooks before? Okay, several of you, not everybody. Use this, bookmark it on your computer at home, and utilize this. It's a great management tool.